Hi, and welcome to Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. Today, I'm joined by the co-founder of Luca, a mental health startup, Nick Greenhalgh. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hi, Lee. Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Right. So, Nick, Luca, give us an idea of what you guys are doing. What's the problem that you're solving with the mission, and what's the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're building a mental health screening startup focused specifically on elite athletes. So developing an app and selling our solution into teams, and then they provide it to the athletes. And I guess the premise behind Luca is that there's an enormous mental health problem in elite sport. I don't think everyone fully knows this. 1 in 3 athletes struggle with their mental health. That's compared to 1 in 4 in the general public. And so it's a huge problem that we're looking to tackle. And these are people who are operating in an environment where it can be really difficult for them to seek help in. They are being sort of judged day in, day out by coaches, selected or not, week in, week out, and having contracts extended or not, sort of year in, year out. And so we're developing a technology that can help them better understand their mental health and be more proactive around it, but then also crucially receive help in a way that works for them when they do need some intervention.
Interesting. So how does it actually work then? I mean, there's lots of mental health applications out there. You know, it's a popular thing that within the workplace in general, not just within elite sport. How does Luca differ from some of those other products that are out there then, other than the fact that it's obviously positioned at elite athletes?
Yeah, you're right. Like mental health is sort of, there's been a huge awareness built, I think largely thanks to COVID over the last, 2, 3, 4 years, let's say. And I think particularly in the workplace, employers are really now understanding the need to better support their employees, because let's be honest, like life and work is stressful. And so you have like these holistic mental health platforms like Unmind or Spill that are selling into corporates. And if you're an employee at a tech firm or wherever, you would have access to this platform. Usually it's through a technology integration with their software, with a Slack or a Microsoft Teams, and that will pop up and you can rate your mood and motivation levels. And then through the platform, you can also get access to some other forms of content in order to de-stress or in order to be proactive about your mental health more generally. And so those are great. And I don't think they're competitive to what we're doing, because they're very much holistic, a catch-all solution. There's telehealth services incorporated in that as well. And then you also have, your wellbeing apps that have been around for a little bit longer, like the meditation apps like Calm and Headspace. And I think, they definitely serve the purpose. They enable people to be proactive, but I don't think they're specific in the way that we are. So what is it that we're doing? We are developing an app that's collecting individuals' mental health data in order to understand an individual's baseline. Like what's normal for you in terms of your anxiety level, your depression level, sleep, your relationship with food, alcohol, substances, that kind of thing. And so we're collecting that data through various different methods. There's a digital questionnaire component, but then we're also gamifying it. We have exercises and audio reflections and that type of thing. So I think how we differ from what already exists in the market is that we're laser focused on using data to help athletes firstly understand what's going on up here, and then provide a pathway for them to get help as soon as they first start exhibiting symptoms. I think that's really clear. And so I guess we're further upstream than some of these other solutions. That's how I'd say we differ the most, because we're not trying to be treatment. We're not going to develop sort of meditations and that kind of thing, because that's already been done. I think the big problem we're looking to solve is saying, hey, it's actually really difficult to understand mental health. It's nuanced. At the moment, there's very little data around it. If we start struggling, we have to try and make sense of those feelings in our own head. And so that often means that you retreat into yourself, you struggle, you don't quite know what's going on. And this can go on for a period of time until you get really quite severely unwell. And at that point, you might then seek help, or somebody might spot it in you and they will insist on intervention at that point. But we're really trying to condense that time between onset of symptoms and receiving help.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because no one knows. And I think the key point you mentioned there was the baseline. You know, what's a normal level of, you know, mental health, and you know, how do I feel when I dip below that baseline level? I think that's probably not just elite athletes, right? It's eventually perhaps could apply to anyone, just to actually get an understanding of what normal is.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I guess the problem, we're solving two problems here. Like, firstly, we're focused on elite sport because there's a big mental health problem there. 1 in 3 athletes struggle with their mental health versus 1 in 4 in the general public. And I think very few people actually recognize that. I think they see these headline articles of a Michael Phelps or a Simone Biles or a Naomi Osaka coming out and speaking about these issues, and they think they're isolated instances, but they're not. It's just that these people are sort of have a big enough platform and have had enough success in order to put their head above the parapet and spread that awareness. But actually, those people who are, you know, in the trenches, trying to be selected, fighting for a livelihood, you know, year in, year out, they're unfortunately disincentivized from seeking help, which is why we really think it's very important that we work with athletes first. There's a very obvious use case there. And I think the other beauty of working with athletes is that people tend to look to elite sport for innovation. And so if we can build a brand and help athletes, then in turn, perhaps we can piggyback off the platform and profile of some of the athletes that we work with, and certainly the teams that we'll be working with. So I guess, look, let's try and solve or tackle at least the mental health problem in elite sport first, before we try and normalize, you know, the behavior of taking a proactive approach to mental health with other parts of the demographics.
I think you're right as well. I mean, like, it's the super famous ones, isn't it, that everyone knows about, the Tyson Furies and that sort of stuff. But I think Trent Alexander-Arnold did an interesting piece, didn't he, recently, about the guys that he played with growing up who got released and didn't actually make it, and the effect on their mental health. Well, that was quite an interesting interview. You see that one?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. He's doing wonderful work, you know, using his platform to shine a light on that, because I think people probably don't realise actually how many, for every one Trent Alexander-Arnold, there are at least 99 others who were as good as him at 12, 13, 14, 15, but don't make it, because that's the stark reality of professional sport. I think there's a 99% dropout rate between, you know, entering a Premiership Academy at the age of 8 and actually then graduating into the first team. And of course, these boys and girls are perhaps, you know, jeopardizing their schooling during these years, and they're not necessarily being set up for the more traditional routes if football fails, and sadly for the vast majority, it will. And, you know, I experienced something similar, I guess. I played a couple of years of professional rugby straight from school at Northampton Saints, and unfortunately my body wasn't up to it, like a lot of, I guess, kids, you know, just dealing with the rigors of pro sport. And so I was rather chucked into the scrap heap and thought, yeah, I wasn't treated particularly well, but it wasn't uncommon for athletes, once they're past their sell-by date or no longer useful, to kind of be, you know, left to their own devices, let's say. And I was fortunate that, you know, I haven't had a conditioned mental health, a diagnosed mental health problem, but that's not to say that, you know, it hasn't affected me, and I don't have sort of ups and downs. And so I think to the extent that we can help these people, because they are young, vulnerable, I think they do need to be looked after, because there is just this interesting power dynamic in elite sport. On the one hand, you have your coaches and you have your management, who are kind of kingmakers to an extent, because they really can determine the trajectory of an athlete's career, both positively and negatively. Then on the other hand, you have these athletes who are young, impressionable, as I was saying, and they're so determined to fulfill their potential in sport that, you know, they don't want to give a coach a reason not to pick them up on Saturday or not to extend the contract, and they're just, you know, desperate to play for their country and all the rest of it. And so it just leads to this hiding of both physical symptoms but also mental health symptoms. So we're trying to be, in the corner of the athletes and provide a way for them to better understand what's going on up here, you know, give them insights so that they can be proactive about it, but then also, you know, should they be exhibiting symptoms, let's get them help in a way that works for them as soon as possible.
And just to clarify that, Nick, so you sell the app to sports teams, sports clubs?
Yeah.
And they would buy what was it, like a subscription or something?
Yeah, so it's a B2B subscription model, and it can sound confusing based on what I've said, based on us being in the corner of the athletes. but the team's paying. But I still think it's logical and rational for the teams to pay for this.
Yeah.
Because athletes are the most valuable sort of assets or commodity that a team has, and so they're spending a lot as a proportion of revenue on their salaries, and a lot of expense goes into their physical preparedness. And so actually to spend on their mental health, I think, is a no-brainer. And of course, there's also a performance element to this as well. The research suggests that when you're in a good place mentally, that performance is better on average as well. So we see that there's a direct return on investment for the teams. And if that means that an athlete gets help, i.e. through intervention, from somebody independent of their team, then so be it. We still provide aggregated and anonymized data on the athlete data, back to the various stakeholders at the teams. They just don't need to know X person is suffering with Y mental health condition. We fundamentally believe that's personal information and it doesn't need to be shared unless they're suicidal or something like that. In which case, then of course confidentiality should be breached in order to protect the individual.
Understood. Okay, interesting. So you guys are what, about 18 months in now, I think?
Yeah, I mean, just over a year. I think, we came through Antler's incubator program. So we graduated from that May of last year when they invested in our pre-seed.
Nice.
So I'd say we're just getting going.
Just getting going. It's never plain sailing. What challenges have you had to overcome so far?
Yeah, I think no huge ones. There haven't been any do or die moments where we've been a whisker away from going under or anything like that. But I think, as you say, it's never plain sailing. I think probably the toughest one this year has been, it's a boring answer because I'm sure you hear this a lot from founders, just like the macroeconomic environment. We raised from Antler, May 2022, and then we went out to market to raise a much larger round from some institutions in the spring. And I think we probably went a little bit too early. I think we probably didn't have quite enough to show. And of course, given what's going on in the world, funds are being slightly more risk averse, and they're demanding to see more in the way of paid traction and perhaps in the way of product and that kind of thing. And I think we were maybe slightly too optimistic. I think as a founder, you have to be incredibly optimistic and believe that everyone's going to love what you're doing and believe in it wholeheartedly. And I think we probably jumped the gun there slightly. And so we've shifted strategy to just raising an angel round, and that's going well. And it's given us the ability to raise from some professional athletes, which I think is a massively positive signal to the market that we're doing something that's needed. But also, these are people that they're our users effectively, right? So they can help us with product development, but also fly the flag a little bit. So I think, the raising was probably a mistake from our side. In terms of other challenges, I think it's just difficult at the early stages. There's so much to do, and when you don't have a big team, when you don't have a big team, to prioritize anything means you have to deprioritize something else. And I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so I don't like doing that. So I think I've just had to get used to the fact that not everything can move along at the same speed, and it's just the nature of the job. So I think we're getting used to that now. But and just dealing with the uncertainty of it, right? I think it's very similar to professional sport in that respect, actually. You can only control the controllables. You can do as good a job as you can, obviously, but then some luck has to go your way, much in the same way that if you're an athlete, you prepare yourself during the week tactically, but also physically, and doing your rehab and your prehab and all the rest of it. And then you just have to believe that Saturday is going to go well. And I think if you can do that and sort of, let go a little bit, that tends to be when the rewards come to you, both as an athlete, but also as a founder. And it sounds counterproductive or not particularly intuitive, but I think there's some truth in that.
Yeah, 100%. And you touched on it a little bit before in terms of your rugby playing career. What's your background other than that?
Yeah, so I went straight into professional rugby after school. So that only lasted 2 years. I'm 33 now, so the intention when I was 18 going into it was that I'd probably be hanging up my boots about now, and a couple of the guys like Courtney Laws and Alex Waller that I went through the academy with, they're now coming to the twilights of their careers. So I had to rethink my plans basically, because I broke both my feet in my second season, which wasn't ideal. So I then went off and did my undergrad. I studied politics and was still thinking about rugby sort of throughout university, and played a little bit for Nottingham, who were in the championship at that point, but the body wasn't really allowing. So I ended up falling into a startup actually, and spent 6 years at a knowledge search startup called AlphaSites, which you probably wouldn't have heard of unless you're a client, which are the PE houses and the hedge funds and strategy consulting firms, or if you're an expert who they work with. Anyway, that was a great learning experience set up by 2 really, really phenomenal Stanford MBAs. I joined as a startup, sort of 30-person startup in London, and it's now multi-billion-dollar business, sort of 1,500 people globally. So,
nice.
So that was cool. But I think from the rugby days, I never managed to recreate that feeling of excitement. I think when you go into pro sport, particularly at a really young age, which obviously most people do, I think you sort of feel like the world's your oyster and anything's possible. And then I really struggled to recreate that at AlphaSites and in some other internships that I did. And so after AlphaSites, I knew it wasn't quite for me long term. I went off and did an MBA. I thought that would be a good grounding into perhaps doing my own thing one day or be doing something else. So I then went off to Oxford just before COVID and did an MBA where I actually worked on the idea behind Luca as part of an entrepreneurship module. And then I decided to commercialize Luca after leaving the MBA. Thankfully, I met a very complimentary co-founder through Antlers Incubator. He's sort of everything I'm not, but in a good way. He's technical. He can build product. I'm very much a business generalist. I sort of have that sport angle, which is obviously appropriate for what we're doing. And Vass, he unfortunately, but I guess relevant to what we're doing, had depression in his early 20s, really quite an acute bout of depression. And that was all because he couldn't make sense of his feelings, and he sort of retreated into himself, and he became suicidal and was self-harming, and had a really tough time for a number of years. And he just so fundamentally believes that the system's broken, like the fact that we have to wait to get really unwell before we seek help or before the system can help us. That just seems to be the wrong way round. And so, he's so bullish and passionate about building technology that helps give insights to individuals around their feelings and enable them to be a bit more proactive about it. So that's sort of my background and how I've ended up here now. 12
Here you are.
A mental health screening startup. Yeah.
So lastly then, Nick, what's next? Anything exciting in the offing?
Yeah, there's always something going on, right? That's the beauty of startup. In the last couple of weeks, I guess we've just started the next phase for us, which is actually really exciting. We're starting work on the second phase of the product, so version 2 of our product, which will be incorporating some AI, which is cool. But also expanding our data collection methods. And so that's keeping Vass busy and out of trouble. So that's good. And then I guess, I'm going to be wrapping up our fundraise, the angel rounds, but then my attention will really turn to business development and onboarding the pipeline that we built over the last year. And we'll be starting to work with our first paying clients from September, which is, tremendously exciting. We run 4 pilots in the past year with British Skeleton and the rugby and rowing clubs at Oxford and Cambridge Uni. And so they've been a really great learning experience, but it'll be, I guess, a different kettle of fish when, professional teams and professional athletes are not only using Luca, but also they're paying to do so as well. It's a slightly different dynamic.
Such an interesting product. It's almost like prevention rather than cure. I would think, that I keep going back to that whole baseline level of where's normal. And I think it'd be interesting. So many different applications, I think, moving forward outside of elite sport as well. But I guess you guys have got to do the sport stuff first. But yeah, really interesting speaking to you. Thanks so much.
No, of course. Great to chat.
Thanks, Nick. So this was Nick from Luca. And guys, you've been watching Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. If you have enjoyed Nick's content and would like to see more of similar, give us a like, a comment, a share, help the algorithm, and hope to see you next time. Thanks very much.